three, four. Welcome to Off Panel, Sketch.com's weekly podcast. We've got a first for this show this week, as two guests are joining for one episode. They're artists Tana Ford and Sean Murphy. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, no problem.
Hey, how you doing,
Thanks
guys?
for having us.
I'll be acting as more of a moderator for this week's discussion, but let's kick things off with introductions. Tana, how did you and Sean first get to know each other?
So I was a fan of Sean's artwork first, but then he came up with this really incredible idea to have the Murphy Apprenticeship Program, which I applied for and was accepted to. And it really sort of changed my life in comics, but that's how we met.
Yeah, she was one of the first ones to submit art, as well as my other student, Corinne. And I was really happy to have ladies interested in doing it. I wanted a 50-50 class if I could have it. So the first two that came in were Tana and Corinne, and they were both awesome. And I wanted to write them both back immediately and say, "You're in," and who cares what happens in 30 days. But my wife insisted, you have to wait the full, window, whatever it was. So I held back, and as soon as we got all the applicants in, I, narrowed it down to my top 10, and Tana was always up there as, one of my top 5. So I got really lucky.
Well, so what I wanted to, I know you guys both want to talk about this today, and so I guess the topic at hand is, a kind of a look at the changing representation of women in comics, both on the page and working on the comics. And I obviously it's a big issue, but for you, let's start out with you, Tana. Like, what do you see changing in comics right now in regards to that issue?
So I think it's a really exciting time to be in comics, just broadly. We have dialogues about multiple perspectives, representational comics that showcase the diversity of the world that we live in, which is really great. And I think incredibly, exciting. Like, there's a lot of potential here. And then behind the scenes, you're also seeing the rise of some attention on creators that maybe haven't been showcased before. We've got, people of color that are making excellent comics, women making excellent comics. I'm a queer woman, and I'm specifically interested in seeing more authentically queer narratives or protagonists portrayed in. I love indie comics, of course, but it's really validating to see people like me, women like me, and people from my queer community and my queer family being represented in places like Marvel and DC. So it's really exciting.
One of the things that I connected with Tana very fast is I felt a good kinship with her immediately, but during those 2 weeks when she was up with me in Maine with the other students, I would sort of ask her all these questions about sort of things that were happening, and the Women in Comics movement was starting to sort of kick off then, and Tana helped sort of fill in a lot of the Jedi training that I needed to adjust and to understand what was happening, and to sort of,
Yeah. And I can only offer my own perspective, like I'm not a mouthpiece. I don't speak for anybody else or with anybody else's voice, but I can say, authoritatively what it's like and what it has been like for me. I got my start in comics by self-publishing a series on lesbian friends, a group of lesbians based in Boston called Duck. And I won the Queer Press grant in 2010 for my very first comic book, which was so validating. I was making it, I had a day job, and so I was like making this comic in my spare time and just sort of like throwing it out into the world timidly. And then I went off to APE in San Francisco, the Alternative Press Expo, and I was welcomed with open arms by all these big bear men, like just pure family. I got so many hugs. Like, they were so loving and so open, and they care so passionately about comics. And it changed, my take on the way I could fit, like that there was a spot in this world, this predominantly, cisgendered, heterosexual, white male world for little old me, that I could carve out a piece too, And since then, since 2010, that's only gotten intensified. That's only multiplied. There's even more space for me and for people like me than maybe there's ever been. And that's
Yeah.
terrifically exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the best time for
Yeah.
women in comics, for gay people in comics, for minorities in comics. I know that we're having some growing pains, and sometimes it seems, things might not be going so well after certain shows. But overall, I think it's still the best time in the history of comics for Tana to be doing what Tana's doing right now, and for all the ladies and minorities.
Just to have people that, have multi viewpoints, like there's just I don't know, there's something so validating about and important about seeing a reflection of yourself or people who have something in common with you, especially when you have like big titles. Growing up, the X-Men comic, the cartoon, was really important to me as a kid. Maybe you guys watched it when you were kids.
Oh, yeah.
Like Saturday morning cartoons. I feel like that's kind of where we all got our start,
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
But there was, you identify with that band of kids that, there's something secretly different about them and that they're ostracized from society. Like, that's a natural fit for a queer kid or a kid that's sort of outside the mainstream. And so to see that finally, being, presented now is really, I don't know, it's really terrific.
You mentioned you got an award and you were in receiving it with all these bear guys.
These big bears, yeah. They're gay bears. They're just big.
Go off of that. So I lived in West Hollywood twice, and I had a lot of gay friends, and I would go to these gay clubs because I didn't give a shit, and I thought it was awesome. People, embracing who they were and all that. But the thing that caught me off guard, which I'd never experienced, and I think it's because as a straight dude, we don't feel the current as much. And, Tana will jokingly be like, oh, what do you care? So you think you're just a straight white guy, blah, blah, blah. And, but
we have our friendship hat on.
That's exactly. Sorry.
Wearing our professional hats now.
Yeah. But I remember going into the club and feeling the stare of these guys who were, when women look at you at a bar, they look at you and they look away. And they, but when men look, they stare like, you're the one. I'm going to find you later. Yeah. And during the night, I had a great time, but I felt very unnerved by that. And nobody did anything inappropriate. But I remember walking away feeling very undone. Like, is this what it's like to be a lady in most straight bars? I think that's rough.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is your experience that for the first time in your life, your body is being sexualized. That you are a piece of meat on display for a viewer, for someone else's, gaze, for someone else's, they're going to consume you. And I think that one of the things that I've been thinking about just in my own life right now is queer spaces and how queer spaces feel like something. And with the world, we have a generation of people that are more tolerant than they've ever been. We've got federally recognized marriage equality, and there's just sort of this normalcy creeping in to the queer community. I mean, my community, the people that I hang out with, almost exclusively are gay. I have family that I love and that I'm close to, and and certain straight friends. Sean, you're one of them. But mostly, I hang out with lesbian women, and we're seeing this sort of, I don't know, normalizing weirdness in our community, and it's made me wonder what happens to gay spaces. What you're describing, Sean, is the experience of being in an all queer space where for the first time in your life you're on display, and that it feels like something, and there's a sort of unsettling thing about it. I think for a lot of women, that's what just existing in the world feels like a lot of the time.
I remember I was walking home to my apartment at like 1 a.m. or whatever, and I had my headphones on, and these two dudes pull up in this pickup truck, and they're like 3 feet away, and they're like, whoa, yeah, shake it! And I remember being like stunned and like jumping back in the curb, and I had my hands over my chest like, well, I never. And I didn't have anything prepared to say, and that really, if I was already sort of becoming aware of that space, it certainly reminded me on the walk home.
Yeah.
And I remember...
You were even walking home with your headphones in. Like, that's not something a woman would ever do. I mean, gay, straight, trans, this is like, when you are a marginalized person, you are always aware of your space.
Yeah, that's true. And that's what I've been learning from you, from my other lady friends in comics, from people like Karen Berger, is that these people around me that I care deeply about are living in a different reality than I am.
Yeah.
And the more I'm aware of it, I feel very angry and I want to help. And I'm not always sure the best way to do that, which is why I thought it was good for us to sort of have this chat.
Yeah, I think that, there are many articles and a lot of really excellent writing that exists on this topic that you, as an ally, can support, but I think I don't know, see, I don't have the answer. I want to answer the question, and I don't have the answer.
You could ask in the form of a question.
I can ask in the form of the question. I don't know. I think, if you or somebody in your position, an erstwhile, well-meaning guy wants to help, at what point is that helping also doing harm or reinforcing the stereotype that women are helpless and that women need help? And that even though you're a good guy, you're still contributing to our sort of cultural misogyny or cultural sexism. And so I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Right, yeah. No, I agree. I know women, if you are empowered, and you should, you don't need our help in one sense. In another sense, we all need each other's help to push this through. And you need all kinds of voices from all angles, all different kinds of feminist voices going in. I absolutely, yeah. I mean, when I tried to do the second apprenticeship, I remember going online and asking for more female students to apply because I was only getting straight white dudes. And I ended up canceling it for other reasons. But one of my takeaways, I seemed like I'd stepped in a hornet's nest by even asking for more women. And I'm not sure what I would have done differently. I mean, if I had just accepted 5 white dudes for my next class, and then the book comes out a year later, it would be me being part of the problem. I'm only perpetuating that stereotype. So I'm not always sure what the answer is.
Yeah, I think you and I had talked. If you guys are interested at home and want to have 20 minutes to listen to a really great talk, there's a woman named Brene Brown who did, I think it's a TED Talk, but if you Google sweaty creatives, you'll be able to, that's the title of the talk. And she talks for a while about the process of being a creative, a person that puts their work out into the world. And when you are in the field that we are in, or even if you're doing graphic design or you're a writer or you're doing anything where you share this stuff that you've made with the world, it's scary. And you are inviting criticism. And she talks about having going up to battle, being a gladiator, and going up, up the stairs into the Colosseum, and that fear and that anxiety and that, self-doubt when you're about to go up there, because you're going to face your critics. And what her takeaway message at the end of this talk is that you can't stop people from saying things and having opinions when your work is being put out into the world, but you can decide who you listen to. And if those people, the people that she's decided that she's going to listen to, are the ones that love her and support her, but also the ones that are in there doing the work, that are doing the hard work and sort of walking the walk and getting their hands dirty. And maybe they're making some mistakes and maybe they're messing up along the way, or they don't get it exactly right, but they're working, they're in the trenches doing the hard stuff. And that message for me was really important. I value, Sean, for example, your work. I look at a book that you make, The Wake. You've got Leeward, and she is baller, man. Like, she's a tough hero, like, she's tough, she takes no nonsense, like, she's got her little dolphin friend. Like, you draw women really, like, strong and heroically, and I think that matters. It's not, I don't know, it's not like,
thank you.
You're not just a cupcake artist or something. There's real substance to what you do, and I think that has value. I think you're walking the walk.
I appreciate it. I mean, I've been lucky. Scott's great with writing female characters, so I've had good parts, and I've built my career not off the big 2 ladders using those characters, but sort of doing these creator-owned.
Right.
And I've had most of my books, I think, have had female leads, like big ones. And when I was starting out, and I've admitted this to Tana before, I didn't feel like I had a voice to help feminism. even when 10 years ago, when no one was really talking about it as much, I just didn't feel like I had anything to contribute. I was part of the group that was historically the problem.
Right.
But even at that level, I remember always drawing girls who had smaller boobs because I felt like triple Bs were overdone in comics, and I had to at least try to tip that scale in my own small way. And as I met more ladies in the industry, especially meeting Karen, she really helped me when I was writing Punk Rock Jesus. Like a dum-dum, I just tended to write a book full of straight white dudes. And I had a Jewish character and a black character, but I didn't really have a lot of ladies because I didn't really feel like I had a lot to say, and I didn't feel like an expert in what they would do. But Karen gave me the go-ahead, and she pointed out, like, you need more women in your story, and I felt so silly for not seeing that on my own.
Yeah.
And Karen giving me the green light to do that, I felt much more secure that she had my back.
Yeah. So
and
you needed her to sign your permission slip that it was okay for you to make her comics?
In a way, like,
and all.
yeah, Karen, her small boobs, okay, yes, okay, good. But I felt more comfortable going along, and I'm happy to have lady friends in the industry who have sort of shown me what the girls' clubhouse is like, and to have their approval, and for them to help, with my Jedi training, and I'll blunder along the way and mess up, and someone like Tana will school me good, and I'll fix it, and trying to get better as the years go on. But yeah, I'm really happy to have been associated with a lot of books that mostly have really great things to say about women in society.
Now, Sean, what was your schooling? Did you go to did you go to college? Did you go to art school? What's your background?
Yeah, I went to a year in mass art. So Tana and I are both from New England, which is probably another reason why we connect. And then I transferred after first year to SCAD, the sequential art department. And the classroom was what you would expect, maybe 80 to 90% dudes.
Yeah.
I remember having a few ladies in the class, and I always remembered sort of what it was like to feel that male gaze. And so I would always reach out to the ladies at shows, like, man, what's this like? Look at all these dudes. Isn't this weird? Like, ugh. I don't know how you guys do it. Which maybe wasn't helping the problem, but I just couldn't help but tell them how impressed I was that they would elbow their way into a stinky convention full of dudes and try to make it fair, but good for them.
Yeah, I went to college in Boston. I went to Simmons College, and it's an all-women's college. And so I come from a very small town, and I was very closeted when I went away to school. And I got an education that sort of cracked me open and just sort of saw the potential in me. And I got to check a lot of my own internalized problems, my own, blindness to privilege and to sexism and misogyny. And I was taught how to see things and how to break down what's problematic about, always seeing movies from one specific viewpoint, or, I had this education that sort of opened my eyes. And I think for most people in this industry, they maybe have gone to art school and maybe haven't had the same sort of, opportunities to learn and to grow in a safe environment where they can check their baggage and sort of evolve their positions in a safe way. And so, and historically, the field of comics is a boys' club, and it has been for a long time. And from articles that are coming out very recently, it seems like it's been fraught with a lot of sexual abuse and really overt sexism and just some terrible, terrible shit. And so how can you expect people like this to evolve seamlessly? I think there has to be some sort of a way for allies to be, re-educated or educated and supported, or, I think if you're doing the hard work, going back to the Brene Brown talk, if you're in the trenches, for you, Sean, whenever you draw a horde of villains or heroes, any of your background people, one of the things that I delight in seeing, you had a horde of barbarians. I think it was what was the time hopping?
Chrononauts.
I think it was Chrononauts.
Chrononauts, yeah. And you've got these big Viking women, wielding axes and smashing enemies, and you just pepper the backgrounds. The getaway driver is a woman. you know, and looking like a badass. Like, that's great. That sort of representation, to my mind, is you doing the hard work, getting in the trenches, and making a difference. You want to see, I think that you want to see more women inside the pages of comics and maybe behind the, you know, as creative teams making comics behind the scenes.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And a lot of that adjustment I've been making is because of having these chats with you and my other friends in the industry. And it's consciousness raising is a term, I learned it through atheist debates, but that actually was a term created by feminists. Yeah. And I love that term because I feel like what's happening now is, what's great is I think twice before I draw a cheesecake image. Yeah. You know, even if it's a character, she's just putting her shirt on before she's about to kick ass. I never do anything too gratuitous with the camera because I never felt comfortable going there. But I always think twice now. And I think up to a few years ago, you never really thought twice about it. You would think, of course, readers, translation men, are going to love this. And that kind of where some of the cheesecake stuff, you know, manages to go off the rails a little bit.
Now, as two guys who are readers and I assume lovers of comics, did you find that sort of, do you find that insulting? That, you know, this idea that you're going to be titillated or, you know, that you want to see the big boobs and the ass and the money shot and all this? Like, did that ever factor for you, or are you only now maybe thinking about those things?
I think David should answer. I've been talking a lot.
You know, honestly, I've never, not to make myself seem like some sort of like evolved person or something like that, but I've never really thought about things like that. I really just went for good stories. Yeah. And like, it's not like I would specifically buy a comic because it had like titillating art or something like that. Yeah. If a story was good, a story was good. And it's, I guess for me, one of the nice things over the especially the last, like, you know, 5 years or so, the evolution in comics, you know, because like, you know, Sean, you entirely work in creator-owned comics, and Tana, you know, you did Marvel's Silk, but you have a Kickstarter right now with Duck's 3rd volume. And like the really nice thing about that is like there's more options for people to tell more types of stories, and for people like me to find more varieties of good comics. And for me, like, so in a very roundabout way, my answer is no, that never really factored in, but I'm excited to see more options coming out because of the options that people like you two have.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that Tana said that always pinged with me was sex is not the enemy. She likes looking at attractive characters doing attractive things. Like, that's not what sets most people off. It's just a certain handling of it that's hard to describe sometimes. And you talk about cheesecake, and I love a lot of cheesecake art. I think that especially some of the stuff from World War II on, you saw the golden age of that stuff. The best cheesecake artists are pinup people. Yep. I think most of them were sadly men, and that's a whole other discussion. But they would draw women that had personhood, which a friend of mine, she reminded me of that word. And you can be attractive and be doing something slightly scandalous, but when there's a vacant look on the face, that's when you're more likely to get in trouble. Yeah. And I never understood why you would leave the humanity out of that person's face. I mean, if you're going to have her like leaning over a bucket, painting a fence, and doing something, you know, in that way, fine. But like, give her humanity at least. Like, find a way to inject more persona into that. And don't let her just look like something that would upset a lot of people. And that's sort of, it's hard to define what it is. It's kind of like that expression, I don't know what's offensive until I see it. Yeah. What do you think about cheesecake stuff, Tana?
Well, but hold on. I think this is a great point. What you're saying, Sean, is that most pinup artists and cupcake artists are guys, but some of the best and most like sexy pinup art for me are also male illustrators, but they're gay guys drawing gay men in very sexualized positions. I think, you know, and I'm going to refrain from naming names, but there's this great and sort of thriving community of, you know, and vibrant art scene that maybe is portraying and depicting, I don't know, the object of desire as something other than a woman. And so nobody's really paying attention to it, or at least it's not on your radar. but it's on my radar and it's on a lot of other people's radar. So I think we're still talking in a very sort of, we've got our narrow focus on, you know, the way that the female form is portrayed and the way that women are presented to, you know, the viewer, which I think is a lot, which is sort of catered to the male gaze. You know, women in comic books and on covers for a millennia have been, you know, just sort of presented very sexually to us on a cover. And I don't think there is necessarily anything wrong with liking that, but it should not be the only thing on display. And for my mind, it shouldn't be the majority of the things that are on display. You know, one of the things that I really liked recently, so I'm a fan of Ms. Marvel, and one of the greatest things about that book for me is that she looks like a kid. Mm-hmm. You know, I think a lot of teen books in the past that I've really loved and that I read avidly showed what should have been teenagers and young people in these, you know, superhero, like just as adults. And it's not an adult title. These are not, they're in adult bodies doing adult things, but they're supposed to be kids or they're supposed to be teenagers. And I really like just that shift has happened, you know, for me, in the comics that I tend to consume and enjoy. So I think that that's really exciting too.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I think when I mentioned most of those illustrators in the 60s or whatever, I only say that because the book I have, I think it said most of them who were hired by these magazines were men, which is not great. But I agree. Well,
they knew what their readership was.
Of course,
and there's nothing wrong with that. I really don't, you know, I really enjoy, I'm a person that enjoys pinups, and I like a certain form of titillating art. I don't think that anybody needs to have their desires policed, but I think that there needs to be a wider variety of things on display and things that are out there and available to us. And that's the very exciting thing about comics right now, is that we have more of that. You know, we're seeing more, you know, of,
enriching.
Of a little bit of everybody, which is great.
Yeah, it's. I think that this is completely enriching.
Yep.
And it's healthier and it's more diverse. I mean, I live in Brooklyn now, and I see as many white people as I do black people and Puerto Rican, and sometimes I even see women. But I mean, I don't see what there isn't to gain by this.
Yeah.
I mean, and women also spend money. I mean, the capitalist argument is, why would you cut out half of your buyership? Why not include everyone? And then, I mean, I don't see what we have to lose by doing this at all. And in a way, I feel like the battle is going to still unfold, but mostly it's over. It's just about waiting it out. Now, in a way, it's like with people who are anti-homosexual or anti-gay rights, they happen to be age whatever and above. Eventually, those people will be gone. And
they're going to be generational turnover, is what Kirsten calls it. They're gonna end up dying off, and they're more tolerant. Grandchildren and children are going to take over again.
Right. And the people who are young and raised, I'm sorry, Tana, I didn't interrupt. People who are young and raised with the benefits of the feminist movement, people like me, who I still pick up every now and then, but I do my best.
I need to interrupt you. Do you identify as a feminist, Sean?
I prefer humanist to everybody. Sean Murphy, will identify as a feminist.
Murphy, swing and a miss.
I worry about the crosshairs hovering over my head when men empathize with that group too much. I feel like there's backlash, which I don't always understand. What do you think about that, Tana?
I mean, you know, you and I are friends, and if I were describing you to someone, I would describe you as a feminist. I think that you are a feminist man. I think that is a fine thing, but I wonder if you want to talk about maybe your hesitation to use that or to self-identify that way. I'm not saying that you are, you know, I'm not trying to put my words on you or, you know, define you in any way. But I wonder why do you hesitate?
Well, I think we've seen a couple of character assassinations in the last few years from people who claimed to be that and then ended up being the opposite, which is despicable.
Yeah.
Like I said before, when I was online asking for more female students to submit to my second apprenticeship, I felt like I was in a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something in my own head that I need to consider, or maybe I'm not being brave enough. I do consider myself a feminist. It's just I'm very careful with who I throw that word down.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in high school, men called themselves feminists just to get laid. And that word has always had its baggage to it, unfortunately.
Wow. I guess I should be surprised. That seems like such a despicable thing.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's common. That's cannon fodder for a lot of comedians. Is a lot of men would claim to be feminists that could buddy up to their lady friends and then eventually, ask them out to prom or whatever.
It's so insulting and infuriating. And
I know.
This is the problem. I don't know. Maybe there is no hopeful tone. Maybe we're all just going down the shitter.
Nope, the battle is won. Hey, this can all change in one generation. Absolutely, this can all change very quickly.
I think it's really important that we have, really empowered female creators making the stories that they have wanted to see and that resonate with them. And I think it's going to resonate with the audience as well. I think that that's a really important thing.
Well, you had a great point about when you start policing your allies, how that can be.
Policing I think it is really a concern when we police our allies. I had one person tell me that, we have to police our allies because they're the ones that are going to listen and they're the ones that are interested in getting it right. And so I think that that's a valid point. I absolutely think that that's a valid point. What I would like to see, I was fortunate enough in my life that I was able to do a lot of my growing and in a safe space, just becoming comfortable, let's say, even just with my own sexuality. This book that I'm working on is about Provincetown, Massachusetts. And it goes a little bit into what you had described when you went to a gay club, Sean, where being queer is the default setting. And that feels like something like that feeling of unease that you had was the reverse in me. I was finally like, the tightness in my back and like my muscles, like I relaxed. I was surrounded for the first time in my life by people like me in every bar and on the street and in the restaurants. And when we got pizza, and I didn't worry that somebody was going to drive down the street and fling slurs at me, and I was, sort of everybody there had something in common with me. And that was so important. And so, I want that. If we can bring an element, if I could bring an element of that safe space into the comic book community, because I think that there are a lot of similarities between the two. You have these sort of people that are maybe just outside the mainstream, maybe nerdier, like esoteric things, kind of geeky, maybe inward. I know these are all sort of stereotypical, but like, we've been to comic book conventions. We've seen a lot of the fandom. We're very enthusiastic, and maybe we're just a little bit left of center. And so you get a whole group of these people together. I want that space to feel like a safe space and like a welcoming space, and that everybody belongs here, and that if you want to come in, there's something for you in here too. And I think for years it's been very alienating, especially to women and to people of color and to queer people, because we had one very thin sliver of the type of art. You had house styles, and you had, sort of very, the representation of women was really problematic, and it wasn't a welcoming space. I would like to see that change, and I think it already is and has been. And I would like it to be a space where allies can learn, and where maybe if you never had to check your privilege before, this is a safe space for you to learn about what that means and to unpack your invisible backpack of privilege. I remember being shocked when I realized for the first time that I had never been followed in a grocery store before, but my friends,
that's what it was, people
of color, have been, and that's something that's always on their radar, and that life is different for my Black friends than it is for me. And realizing that felt like something, and and I was able to learn and adjust to that and sort of unpack my invisible backpack in a safe space. And I would like that to be true in comics as well.
Right. When I was starting to become aware of what some of my lady friends were experiencing, I mean, one gal said she didn't even like filling up her gas in her car at night.
Yep.
And I thought, it's never occurred to me to keep one eye towards the dark alleyway.
Yep.
And I was saying to Tana earlier, it's like when you open up your computer and you find out which programs are always running in the background. And you can see how much memory usage they're taking up. And for men, for women, they have an extra program that men don't have. It's just called a extra security program. When they walk home at night, they're looking towards the shadows. You know, you walk with your keys and your knuckles. And I can understand why I'm trying my best to empathize with what that must be like, because it's something that's not obvious to most people in comics.
Yeah, I'm gonna just correct you a little bit, Sean, and I'm gonna say that maybe most men who are cisgendered, heterosexual, maybe white men don't think about it, or maybe even I don't know, men of color do. But like at night, if I were a black man, I would also have a program running. You know, like I wouldn't feel necessarily safe myself. And I think that, you know, for a trans man or, you know, for somebody who's genderqueer or, you know, we kind of always have these safety protocols, these programs running in the background, as you call them.
Right.
And I think being aware of that is a really important thing.
We were in Bed-Stuy, and I would work when my wife was harassed a few times walking home from the subway. And that, I do feel that, I guess at shows, I forget that all the women there have that program running in the background or at these parties. And it's good to remember. And it's just one of those lessons that it's just going to have to keep reminding people that that's always going on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Interesting. Thank you for correcting me, by the way.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to expand what you were thinking.
Yeah. No, thank you very much.
Well,
I'm sorry, David. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, like, my wife has told me in the past that I have like a number of people have told me I have a very innocent perspective on the world. Maybe it's partially because I grew up in Alaska, which is simultaneously surprisingly diverse and also like really disconnected from everything else.
Yeah.
But I go running with a coworker regularly at lunch, and on days where I don't run, she doesn't run also. And one time I asked her, I was like, why don't you run? And she was like, it's not safe for me to do that. Like, and I never even considered something like that before. And one of the things that, and not to, you know, pretend like I really know like how to best approach it as like a cisgendered man or white man. But one thing that I've really discovered is I don't know anything about what, you know, people of color's lives are like, or like, you know, women or, you know, gay women or anybody that's not me. And the best thing I can really do that a lot of people don't do nearly as well as they should is really just listen, because I can learn a lot if I just listen and try not to tell them what their lives are like, because I don't know.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's terrific advice. I think if you find yourself, readers or listeners, if you find yourself in an environment that is unfamiliar, where people are talking and maybe connecting, and you are in the position of being an ally or a supporter, but you are not part of that conversation, listen to it. You know, I would urge people not to try to take over that conversation. Don't talk over, you know, people who are telling you their truth. Listen, open your mind. And I think, you know, there's a lot of that. I see a lot of good in our community. I think that this fandom, comic book fandom, is one of the most vibrant and open-minded in the world. And I think that, you know, you're going to have bad apples everywhere, but every time I go to a Comic-Con, I meet really earnest kids and like tremendous cosplayers and enthusiastic fans and people with open hearts and open minds. And I find it really invigorating. And I think that there are always bad apples, but by and large, there are some really awesome fans. I think we're really lucky in that way.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you completely, Tana. And I get curmudgeonly in my own head sometimes because maybe I don't get out of the house enough. And when I go to a show, I preemptively get nervous because what I've collected on the internet is skewed in one direction. And I'm like, I don't want to go to this party. What if this person's there? What if I don't want to get caught up in that? And it's silly to let that affect you. Yeah. Really. I mean, I understand why it happens, but as soon as you meet people in line who love your book, who love Duck, you know, when Tana sets up these, you know, women in comics panels, that the spirit that you get back is always, it trumps, I hate that word, yeah. But it totally overtakes any reservations that you might have. Damn you, Trump.
No names, Sean.
Oh, yeah. No, we can leave that one in.
Oh, God, fantastic. Yeah. And I think mindfulness in general is a great thing to have. Be more mindful, like just to be mindful of,
right.
these things.
If you're feeling defensive, then you're not listening.
Yeah. Yep.
And I
Yes,
understand
exactly.
why it feels like maybe people skew things and they feel like they are being attacked.
Yeah.
But when you're feeling defensive, your ears are closed.
Yeah. Like I think, one of the first articles years ago that I read was about a woman who, like people often impose on women's time. You'll get asked as a woman, where things are, or, it's the whole like, where did I leave my shoes, honey? I don't fucking know. They're your shoes, People, especially men, tend to just single out women and ask them. And there was this one article about a woman who spent she was a working professional, had a comic book out, was on her way to a panel or something. And this guy interrupts her and she talks with him for 20 minutes and sort of is kind of soothing to him and reassuring and, you'll get him next time or something. And at the end of it, he really insults her. He says something she says, well, but I'm working, we all have our struggles. And he's like, yeah, but you're not a real writer. And she's just spent, all of this time being really nice to this dude who doesn't even see this slap in the face. Mm-hmm. And it's that kind of thoughtlessness that I would love to see changed, that I would love people, men especially, to start checking, you just pay more attention to this stuff.
Right. The consciousness raising effort, that's what's going away. And I feel like we're making up for lost time in comics.
Yeah.
Maybe we should have had these discussions years ago, but unfortunately we're getting a super congested window of change. Within a few years, we're making a lot of headway, which is great.
Yep.
But I understand why there's these sort of struggles, and as people try to elbow each other out of the way to try to figure out, what did you call it, Tana, to figure out your sea legs?
Oh, yeah. We're all just trying to get our sea legs. In the changing landscape of comics, we're all trying to find our sea legs. And I think it is a balancing act for everyone, and I would love to see the comics fandom and the comics world of creators achieve more balance, and have meaningful dialogues about things. We're going to get it wrong. We're not going to know the answers to these things, but I think it's important to have these kind of conversations, and really open up the dialogue.
I have a good question for you, Tana. So some people would say that you have these women in comics panels, and some creators of women don't like them because they don't want to be seen as a female first and a creator second. They just want to be known for their art.
Right.
So there's some people who don't agree with them at all, and some people who do.
Yep.
I was curious where you came in on that.
I'm on the I don't agree with them at all. I don't think we need men in comics panels, so why do we need women in comics panels? I really like having, and I spearhead diversity in comics, and specifically queer-themed comics panels, like Queer Comics Today, or, the history of queer comics, that kind of thing, because I think that deserves to have and needs to have a spotlight shined on it. And that usually features diverse creators. For anybody that's going to be in Thought Bubble in the UK, we've got a great panel. It's going to be on Sunday at 1 o'clock, I think. They haven't announced it yet, but I don't know if they're not going to mind. They're going to want more people to go.
Yeah.
And anyway, so there's a handful of us, and we're talking about sort of diversity in queer themes and queer characters in comics and where we think it's going. And so I think that those are great. But I've attended some women in comics panels, and they've been really great. And they featured some women in comics that I'm a huge fan of. But I think that we've sort of, as a culture, outgrown them. We don't need women in comics panels. We can have, panels on their projects, or panels on what they're working on, or, just creative, whatever. But I don't think that needs to be the focus.
Right. So but that's interesting, though, because there was a time where we probably did need more women in comics panels.
Yep.
And queer in comics panels. And now that we've made progress with women's in comics, you think maybe we don't need those as much anymore, and we should do. There still are battles that need to be fought, like the queer in comics panel. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that they're sort of obsolete now. I think it was nice, to have them at first, but we have covered this ground. I think that there are, if you are still interested in just the subject of women in comics, there are a dozen, 24, 1,000 articles that you can read on the subject. And the best way to get to know the women making comics would be to read their work and, to listen to them talk about their work, not necessarily their experience making that work. I don't know.
I agree with you, because I've heard my lady friends debate whether they should bother doing these women in comics panels or not.
Yeah.
And I sort of came around to thinking they're good. Only because the people that go, the women who attend, the fans, the readers, they're so excited, happy. And it's sort of like a safe zone, like a gay club was for me. For them, it's probably mostly going to be ladies. They're not going to, they're in a safe spot where they can get some information, be entertained for a bit. So even if the creators, yes.
I think
so even if the lady creators don't enjoy them, and politically maybe it doesn't make sense, the spirit that you create in the line who is dying to get into those is so pure that I can see why maybe they still need to happen. I'm not sure though.
Do you guys know who Mae Jemison is?
No.
She is the first African-American female astronaut.
Oh.
And she credits seeing Lieutenant Uhura on the original Star Trek series as one of her inspirations for becoming an astronaut. She was also a dancer and a scientist, and she's this really incredible woman. Actually, Sean, she's in an episode of Star Trek Next Generation in season 6.
What?
Yeah.
What?
The first real astronaut, like the real astronaut to be on the show. After her, they had a couple of other, like, real, actual astronauts, but she was the first. And she plays, like, opposite Geordi or something. I think they're buddies in real life. But anyway, the importance, there is something so deeply important about seeing a reflection of yourself doing things. Because she saw Lieutenant Uhura in space on a spaceship, she knew that an African-American girl could grow up to become an astronaut. And, a friend of mine made this really great point. In Star Trek, there are no gay characters. There's no gay guys. And he's like, it's the future. We're at least 10% of the population. We should be there somewhere. And he's like, I don't even care. Just give me, some flamboyant side character who, is in 10 forward saying, like, we need some margaritas. Like, that would be fine, And this sort of, like, erasure because of lack of representation is really damaging to a community and to a person, in the same way that, like, stuffing women in refrigerators is really damaging to your female readership. If that's all we are presented with as examples of what we can be in the world of comics is a device to send the strong man on a revenge quest, then that's really messed up. And so I think it's great that there are these enthusiastic women and young girls going to these panels. But I think that those people would probably still go, and it's important for them to see women creating comics so that they know that they can do that too. But at this point, I think that experience could be folded into like a talk about the books themselves. Maybe we get more specific and go like creators of sci-fi, and it's a panel full of all women. It doesn't necessarily have to be a panel called Women in Comics to just be women in comics.
Right.
Yeah,
I agree. Maybe, so if those have been done, those are becoming slightly passé. The fight is not, obviously, but the panels, if they could add something else to them to spice them up or to make them, to take the next step. Yeah. I think I can totally see your point there.
Yeah. I think, and it could be a subtle sort of thing where you have a panel about, I don't know, like name a title or name a category, horror comics or something, or sci-fi comics, and it's a panel that has exclusively women. Do you think anyone would notice? Like, would that be part of the articles that are written on it? Would it be subversive in its own way just to have females? On the panel and moderating or whatever?
If you set up a theme like women in comics and X-Men, or if you specific like women in comics and Star Trek, hell, I'd go to that one just because I love all things Star Trek.
But what I'm saying is, Sean, what if you just had a Star Trek panel? What if it's just a Star Trek panel and you show up and everybody up on the dais is female? or female.
You're right. You're
You
You're right. I didn't see your point.
Yeah.
Thank you for Tana explaining that to me.
I think I just Sean's played.
This is not getting deleted out.
That is definitely staying in.
So I introduced Tana. So we're big Trek fans, Tana and me and some other people.
If you couldn't already tell.
Yeah.
And I introduced her to Voyager, which is hailed as the feminist Star Trek for a long time, and it's actually starting to be rediscovered as years later. Like in its time, it wasn't necessarily as appreciated as being feminist as it was. And 7 of 9 comes on camera, and Tana's like, "Who is that?" We both had some wine at that point, and I'm like, 7 of 9. And I could see her math, like, proportionally, how is that possible? She went from like, "I love this character. She's a great actor."
Yep. If I did not see that character actually be a human woman, I would have felt like if you drew the episodes where 7 of 9 is on screen, like it's impossible. Her body proportions are like doll impossible. I can't believe that she exists as a person. I would have railed against that if you had drawn it in a comic.
Yeah, like if I ever saw a dude draw that, I would have come down on him like you wouldn't believe. Like I can't believe that anatomy is actually real.
Like she's just got so much torso.
So the whole argument of like girls don't actually have proportions like that. You just pull out a picture of 7 of 9 and boom, you win the argument.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Actually, it was really awesome. You sort of curated my whole Voyager experience because I remember trying to watch the show when it first came out and the pilot was terrible and I just never got into it. And you you curated the experience. You cherry-picked a half a dozen episodes and it was awesome, man. I'm into it.
What was great is you kept seeing looking for lesbians on the ship. Like maybe 7 of 9 is a lesbian. Do you think Ensign Rowe is a lesbian? I don't know. The captain. I'm not so sure Chakotay would be her type.
When you're a lesbian, everything looks like a nail. What was the thing?
No, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a lesbian. Tana is a hammer for sure.
We have to put our professional hats back on. I had a friend put up a Facebook status the other day that was like, yet again, and it was all about, she was ranting about a girl on the subway who, there was a guy that was aggressively looking at her, scanned her up and down, changed seats to sit next to her, asks her how she's doing, she ignores him. He gets off at the same stop that she gets off, but she's going in a different direction. My friend sees this guy find her and turn around and follow her. So my friend follows him, following her, right, to make sure that she's safe. And then she ends this story in all capital letters saying, why am I doing this? What the fuck am I going to do to this guy if he decides to try something? What can I do? She's like 5'2". She's, she's not very strong because it's her. And she's like, where are the other men? Why are you not doing this? And the responses to it were really interesting. One of the responses came from a trans guy who was like, I think about this stuff all the time. Safety is always on my radar. If I saw that, I'm not sure that girl would feel safer with 2 guys following her instead of just one. Even if one of them knows that he's going for good reasons. And another guy had said, yeah, but people are less inclined to try something if there's a witness or if somebody's paying attention, and that ultimately it boils down to like if this guy did try something on this girl and the guy following the guy engages him, the girl has a chance to get away, and it was this really sort of heated debate. And I think, even on an everyday level, people aren't sure what they're supposed to do or what the right thing is. And you don't want to make that girl feel more uncomfortable. You don't want to send mixed signals. If you're a handsome guy, Sean, if you take a girl up to, if you drop her off safely at her room and she makes a pass at you, you're a married man. That could be, this could be a dangerous situation. Is that supposed to be on your radar?
Right.
And I don't know that there are easy answers for this kind of thing. What do you think, David?
I don't think there are easy answers because everything is so situational and dependent on the person. And, I'm sure there are all kinds of different ways you probably could approach that, anecdote that you shared from Facebook.
Yeah.
But, ultimately, I don't know. I totally understand what the trans guy was saying, given the fact that, if you followed then, you would seem like two people were following, and that's even worse than one.
Yep.
As far as like if you really want to be perceived as an ally, or if you really want to behave like an ally, the best thing you can do is just, don't put yourself in positions to be like, don't put yourself in a position to be like, I don't know if I want to use the word creepy, but like you don't want to put yourself in a position to be perceived as the enemy, because it's very easy to do that and not even intend to, because it seems like intent, like a lot of people like get stuck on the idea of intent, as if intent is what defines what you do, but typically what you do defines what you do.
What you do defines what you do.
And I think people need to be more conscientious of that, and just not do those things. Because I remember being at a party at a con once and seeing there was a guy from a comic site, and he was talking to a woman, and he was just not, being super great. He was being a little aggressive, and I actually went up and talked to him. I just asked him to like walk. I asked him to come talk to me off to the side, and we talked about it, and then he stopped going up and talked to her.
Good on you. Thank you for interceding. Thank you for being that guy that is willing to check his friend and not just let it go.
Yeah.
Well,
I was actually the friend. No, I'm kidding.
I will say that I actually had no idea who that guy was, but the one thing I will say is like the other, when I was going up to it, I was like, I didn't want to be the guy who went up and like tried to seem like he was having bravado in front of like the woman, like as if I was trying to be, like making that a move or something, which is kind of why I asked the guy to step away and talk to me.
Good for you. All good instincts.
I kind of feel like people just have to be a little bit more conscientious about their behavior, because like I said, your actions define who you are more so than your intent.
I wonder too how much of it is like maybe expecting a sort of pat on the back with the girl, the following from the train. If two guys are following you, right, and one of them is there to make sure that this other guy doesn't do something, then at least if he's, maybe in one case, maybe because he's following and paying attention to that guy won't try anything.
Right.
The girl will still be afraid, but now because two guys are following her, but one of them has good intentions and he never has to talk to her. Like he doesn't necessarily have to engage with that woman and be like, don't worry, young lady, I'm protecting you. He can just do his job as, that he's decided to intercede and see that she gets home or that she gets to a safe place and then go his own way. I think maybe the issue comes if you do want feedback from that woman that you are quote unquote protecting.
Right.
If you did approach this guy at the bar with bravado as a way of hitting on this girl or something, like intent does matter. And I think, bringing this guy away from her, moving it, and like that you don't necessarily need the attaboy from the girl in order to approve of what you're doing. I think that matters.
You did the right thing. When I walk home from the train at night through Brooklyn, knowing how a woman who's 20 feet in front of me walking in the same direction, she's probably got an eye on me, hoping that I just don't start, And I'm aware that she's aware, and I wish there was a way for me to walk in a cool way where she knew that I was probably more likely to help if there was a problem, If I cross the street and start walking on the other side, that just looks weird, and I don't know what the right solution is. And I wish I need a shirt that says, like, I'm a safe man.
I have to admit, I was totally thinking about, like, when you were describing that scenario, Tana, I was like, what if you had, like, a newspaper and it intermittently just, like, leaned against the wall and started reading the paper? Would that seem less... I'm like, oh, that seems much more creepy. No, that's a terrible idea.
No, I think you handled it right. And, it's funny, when I go to these events afterwards, if I'm talking to a lady, I'll try to not box her into a corner while I'm chatting. Or I'll chat with her, but I'll have it so both of our backs are to the bar, so we're both looking out and away. And I'm trying to build a physical space that's comfortable and try to not be the problem person at the party.
Yeah, well, good on you. I think a lot of guys just generally, because it's part of their invisible backpack of privilege, is men tend to take up more space. So if I'm on an airplane and the guy next to me is like, there's one armrest. And if there's a man of a certain age, sort of my age-ish, like they just take up space. His leg's going to be on my side. His arm's going to be on my armrest. Same thing in the train. There's a whole Tumblr about men taking up too much space.
What is it called? Manspread?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's this one that's like somebody did a cat version, and so it's like men taking up too much space on the train with cats, and so they or like leave room for cats. I think that's what it is, and they Photoshop cats in between these guys' wide open legs, and like they're just taking up all this space. So they put a bunch of cat pictures in there, which is hilarious, but it's so offensive. Like dudes tend to take up so much fucking space. So I wish more guys were being mindful of it like you are.
So Tana and I we have a flight together to Leeds, and then we're taking a vacation with our wives.
We're going.
So I plan on being at. When we sit down in that airplane, Tana, I fully expect you to take both armrests, put the bag in my lap, just fall asleep leaning on me, and totally put your baggage on in my way.
I'll tweet the picture too, and I'll be like, finally, some justice.
Yeah,
really
payback.
To stretch out.
Payback. I have to answer for the crimes of straight white guys everywhere.
I actually kind of go the opposite. I feel really. I'm 6'3", and like I've taken a lot of flights in my life, but I always feel really guilty about being so big. I always like try to get as small as I possibly can.
See, I don't think that's the answer either. But I think being mindful of it is important. I like it when people are mindful. I find by and large that women, especially the female creators that I know in this industry who've had to work pretty freaking hard to get where they are just sort of mindful of things. They don't really take stuff for granted, including personal space and including, whatever. And so to see guys being mindful of that is really sort of a relief. Like that's good on you guys.
I had a good theory, and I'm curious what you guys think of this. I feel like when I go to a fancy event and I'm wearing a nice suit and ladies are dressed up as well and there's good champagne decorations, and you hear the clicking of people's fancy shoes as they walk around, it almost beckons you to up your game and be a little bit more professional and kind of, tighten that belt a little bit and really check your behavior. But I feel like at Comic Cons, you walk to the event and everyone's like, t-shirts, unshaven, they smell like ass because they've been working all day, everyone's exhausted and gross, and it looks more like a barbecue, and I feel like the etiquette just plummets. And I thought maybe for New York this year, I'm just going to try to wear a nice suit the whole time and see if it affected my experience.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd be interested to know how that experiment goes for you.
Because even at shows, some of the wealthiest professionals in comics still dress with jeans and t-shirt, and then they go to these fancy steakhouses, and you can see the managers just like, oh, great, comic people are in town, I wonder if, the etiquette is affected subconsciously by what we're wearing. And,
Well, I don't know that in other industries. So most of my professional friends, people that work in different industries and have like holiday parties, people get shit-faced at holiday parties. Mm-hmm. And there's just something about a group of people together and like letting their hair down. And so I don't think it's exclusive to comics, but you might be onto something with the casual dress and the informal aspect of it. I wonder how much of it has to do with the old, like the boys club angle,
I was just going to say, like, I have unique insight into this because every year before New York Comic Con, I used to go to New York Comic Con every year, but I for my job, I would have to go to this other convention that is an entirely different industry. And the third night of the event, there's always this big, like, crazy, like, bender, effectively, that people go on. And everyone's dressed casually, and it typically is, like, I don't know, semi-debaucherous. And then the next night, they have, like, this end of the event gala where everyone fancy dresses. And it is, like, night and day. Completely different. Completely different.
Yeah, maybe you're onto something. Oh, one other thing that I have not really experienced. I mean, I've only been to a couple of shows where I knew the secret, which is go to the hotel bar after the convention and hang out with professionals. Don't go to your house, Tana. But since then, like, I've had some really fun nights and, like, exciting conversations after the actual convention, and that's been really great. But the thing that I've been reading about, so I've never really experienced it firsthand, but what I've been reading about so much lately are people who are in leadership positions and heads of companies and really, powerful artists, whoever, getting shit canned and behaving in this grossly inappropriate way. And there are stories that my friends have of like bosses getting drunk and, whatever, also behaving inappropriately. But those seem very small in comparison, like not as often, I think, as it happens in comics. Am I reading this right? Like, is this just a thing where people get super shit-faced and do douchey things? Has this always been a part of the comics community?
It's risky to answer that, but I will say that because I think one certain type of creator has been the name of the game for so long. When women start showing up, it's like it went from a boys club to who brought their wife, who brought the girlfriend, like who's your friend, ha ha ha. It never occurs. So we've had this has been building and building and building, and it never occurs to leave that event, go to a place where there aren't comic book people, and try to hit on people there. If you're a single guy, you want to take it outside of your work. But that does not occur to comic book people. They see parties and events as an excuse to get holiday slammed. It's like their priority is to get fucked up, and then if they can network a little bit, that's good too. Whereas I feel like for photography conventions, they're there to network, and if they get a little drunk, well, they'll deal with it. But I don't know why the green light on douchey behavior. Where did that come from?
You know what? I wonder how much, and this is how much it goes hand in hand with the fact that there have been so little repercussions. If you were at a photography convention and you get shit canned and make a complete ass of yourself or behave offensively or even illegally, like you do something illegal there are going to be repercussions. And from what I've been reading, that doesn't exist in comics. Like there isn't really any backlash to you being a dick.
I was going to say, the one thing I will say is I do think that they're what you're saying, Tana, isn't entirely true, because I do know that there's some very famous clothes designers and photographers and stuff like that who behave very inappropriately and still keep their star at the same level. I think the thing is going back to the fancy dress idea and everything like that. It shouldn't take what you're wearing in the situation to make you act professionally. And then I feel like maybe it's that I've always wondered whether or not there's a certain element of you guys kind of talked at the beginning about how you're at desks and you're isolated and you're not really around people. So when you're around people, you kind of maybe some people just are like, whoa, I'm gonna totally blow this out, and that doesn't necessarily go well. It's kind of going from 0 to 60 really, really fast. And that can be a good thing or that can be a bad thing. And I don't know. It's, to me, it's such an easy thing to say, but I just feel like the onus has to be on the people involved to act better. I just don't know how to encourage that behavior short of more sanctions, as you're hinting at.
Right. I think that there have to be repercussions when people behave in completely inappropriate ways, especially regardless of your station. Don't behave like a dick. It's so funny. My girlfriend and I have a rule. It's sort of like our family words, which is don't be a butt. And I think if more people would behave like that in the world, we'd have a better world. Don't be a butt. And so if you don't act like a complete, idiot, if you don't get completely drunk.
It really isn't.
Yep.
But I was going to say, you were saying there really doesn't seem to be many repercussions, and I totally agree with you. I feel like as freelancers, there's not much legally a publisher can do to us other than not hire us again, which I think is an appropriate response if you're out of line that often. As far as the editors or employees who work for these companies, then human resources and legalese would say, you have to can them. And there really doesn't seem to be enough repercussions for that. As far as what we can do as fans and readers is when something like this breaks and there seems to be a healthy amount of evidence in a pattern of behavior for someone that should not be doing comics or not worth supporting, that person usually does pay the price. And I won't name names, but I know we're all thinking of a handful of people that have been slaughtered because of their bad choices, and rightfully so in most of those cases. And I think there is a big price to be paid. And when you are trying to update your Wikipedia page and erase that paragraph that says that you're inappropriate, and someone keeps pasting it back there, I mean, you've done something wrong at that point, you know. And it's interesting the pattern of behavior with a lot of these, well, we'll say men, mostly it is men, a lot of these guys have. And when something happens and they get exposed, they really don't have a lot of people defending them. None of their lady friends are like, no, I've known this guy for years. And this is, like, they're so alone when they get singled out.
Well,
and I think it's just telling, you know?
Yeah, and deservedly so. I think, you know, it
Right.
should be, again, it's like asking a woman for directions or asking, you know, presuming upon, you know, women more than on other men. That's another, like, I don't know, insidious sexism thing, surely, that we have.
I know I'm keep approaching this from the idealistic perspective, but I do think that, like, people just have to be more conscientious of each other's personal space, regardless of gender or situation. And I mean, cons are inherently, like, especially given how popular they've gotten, there are such, like, rat races with so many people there. Like, you go to New York Comic Con or, like, you know, San Diego or even Emerald City Comic Con is just getting so big. And, like, they're just so packed with people. You just have to be respectful of each other and not be weird. And, like, and I think everybody would be better off for that. It's just, it has proven to be, you know, difficult for some people. And I think it just has to come down to identifying and, you know, dealing with the issue in a effective manner that will actually impact change.
Yeah.
And, well, you know, I know that we've kind of went in some varying directions, but one place I want to go before we wrap up is, I know there's a lot of negative out there on this subject, but for the both of you, like, what has you excited about all the positive change that is happening in comics and where comics are headed?
What I'm feeling most hopeful about and positive is just I mean, like I said before, this is the best time in the history of comics to be a lady in the industry, to be minority, to be gay. And I think it's the best time to make decent money, to protect your ideas legally. We have 40 years of legal mistakes some creators have made, so we know to get contracts and lawyers involved for future movies or whatever. This is a really mostly I feel amazing about everything. And I love seeing so many women in the industry. And I love it when you have these polls or this research that says that half of them are now ladies. I think that's great. I love women. I think that they should be drawing more, writing more. I mean, I love looking at female artists' work because I feel like they have a different approach to the art that guys like me would not have thought of. They tend to be, you know, more creative, and they focus more on backgrounds in some cases, or their lines are softer, but that's stereotypical. But overall, like, I really love seeing ladies artists, and it's just a new way to inject diversity and a new perspective. I think it's great. It only helps us. Yeah,
to expand on that idea, I agree with all of the things that you said. To expand on that idea, I really like it when a queer creative team, or specifically a queer artist, will draw gay characters, because there's a whole queer style to the affectations that we choose, to being a lesbian or to being a gay man or to being trans. And, like, there's this whole, it just visually, it reads authentically. And it's very subtle that maybe a person that doesn't live in that world or experience that reality, they just may not think of. And, you know, it's not a commentary on the quality of the art. It's just the subtle details that puts it over the top for me. And so I get really jazzed when you have sort of a diverse creative team, when you have these new perspectives and people from, you know, different backgrounds collaborating. I think that it's just the potential for awesome is off the charts. And it is a great time to be a comic book reader.
Absolutely. And my favorite subject in comics is the women in comics movement. I love this subject. I mean, I dropped my religion and became an atheist a while ago, and that was kind of my subject du jour for maybe 10 years. And I think that this is an amazing topic because it involves, like, psychology and social trends and art and social media. It's complicated. You know, we trip up every now and then, but it's so clearly heading in the right direction. And it's exciting. And I probably
it's because I bring up the subject so much to my lady friends, I'm probably bothering them. Like, God damn it, Sean, stop asking us how we're doing. Like, just eat your fucking hamburger.
As one of your lady friends who constantly talks to you about this, I'm like, it's really exciting. You're just really, I feel like it's added a sort of level of excitement and possibility to what maybe had become a stagnant place. You know, we were getting very good stories, but very cookie cutter stories. You had a house style, you had a way of presenting things that was sort of Comics Code approved. And now there are no rules. You get to break the rules. We get to be inventors in a new medium of, you know, the blending of words and pictures sequentially, and where can you take it, and what are we going to see? And it's a very exciting time. And there's this, it's awesome right now.
Before we sign off, do you guys want to, Tana, what are you currently up to? I know you got a Kickstarter going.
Yeah, right now I'm coming into the final week of my Kickstarter for the third installment of my lesbian adventure series. I've got my intrepid band of friends going to Provincetown over Memorial Day weekend. And it's going to be a really fun romp that shows lesbian characters who are not despicable, which I think we often see in media. And it's also going to encapsulate this queer space. We were talking a little bit earlier in the podcast about how important queer space is and how nice it is to be the default setting of a place, to look around and see people like you and to kind of relax and know that you're okay here. And for me, that was a really important thing. And I want to try to distill it in this next book. And so please, if you're interested, go support my Kickstarter. And that's what I'm up to.
And don't forget your the pinup I did.
Oh yeah, and Sean did a cover for it as well, which I'm launching. I'm announcing it tomorrow, which right now is going to be Monday. So probably it will already be up on the website. So go check it out. Duck, Third Time is the Charm on Kickstarter. Please pledge and help make gay comics and queer representation a real thing.
I'm currently working on Tokyo Ghosts with Rick Remender. Issue 2 will hit pretty soon. And after that, I plan on doing Volume 2 of Chrononauts, and hopefully we'll be starting the production of the movie next summer.
Whoa.
Nice.
Awesome.
Big time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel from Sketch.com. You can find this week's guests, Tana Ford and Sean Murphy, pretty much all over the place. Tana has a Kickstarter running right now called Duck, Third Time is the Charm, and it's a great project that could use your support. Check it out. Tana's also on Twitter at @TanaFord and on Tumblr at tanaford.tumblr.com. Sean's on Twitter as well at Sean_G_Murphy, and you can find his art in Tokyo Ghost right now. Find more sketch content at Sketched, that's SKTCHD.com. Follow us on Twitter at @SketchedComic, and like us on Facebook at /Sketched. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.